with great sadness, the light tank recon meta has come to a halt. It has been nerfed to the ground. Now, it is still viable for breakthrough, but for armor, it's just not worth it anymore. So, as an example, you would add on a light tank, and roughly this would give you usually about maybe 8 or 9 armor at the very start of the game. Now we're getting 3. Now, 3 is just not viable. Why? Because if we look at the division itself, just the raw division, any old equipment, it can be pierced. This crap division can pierce itself, meaning a crappy infantry, a crap gun, aka this gun, has a piercing of 4. Let's just be serious for a second. In a perfect world, you kind of want more than 4 armor, so that the basic interwar gun can't pierce it. Then you've got piercing of 5 with the MP3A, and then you've got piercing of 10 with the assault rifle, and then you've also got these bonuses as well, 100% piercing. If we max out the assault rifle and also max out anti-tank rocket techs, so now this has a piercing of 27. And if we take off the engineer and the artillery, just a raw infantry division has a piercing of 30. Of course, that's super late game, so it is pretty advanced. But in all fairness, let's just say you're playing a multiplayer game and someone's doing the light tank recon meta, well, old meta. This is the counter for it. You don't really need to making advanced anti-tank guns, for instance. Anti-air would be quite effective too, piercing of 25. Anti-air, yeah, the anti-air on this is so low, it actually reduces the average piercing due to the fact that it's so high from the base amount with the initial techs. Yeah, so it's not even required to add on any kind of advanced piercing. Anti-air could work, anti-tank is overkill, but at the end of the day, these technologies that are quite advanced, I'll admit, are the solution, because this adds on so much raw piercing for basic infantry. But sadly, going back to the initial point, unfortunately, light tank recon is pretty crap. 3.2 armor is very, very, very small. So let's see what we can do to fix that. So we can add more armor on just by adding the increments on. Sloped armor usually isn't the best option, but we're going to have to try. I guess what we could do is research basic armor protection and also improved armor protection. You can get these in 1936, so it's not a big deal. You could do them before the war. That's the point I'm getting at. You could do them before the war. So in that case, what does this offer us? This offers welded armor, which gives a big bonus to armor. It offers the extra increments of armor. Now you can go over 9 armor and it doesn't add extra chromium on. That's amazing. And then I guess you get sloped, which is okay. And also you get armor skirts. Armor skirts is awesome. 2 armor, 3 breakthrough for only 0.5 production cost. Amazing. And this is it. 47 armor. I guess because reliability doesn't matter because it's only a recon tank. To be honest with you, radio's probably overkill too, so you can extra ammunition storage. And if you're focusing primarily on armor, I guess you could get rid of some of the extra breakthrough with the turrets and maybe go for a machine gun if you wanted to. But then you're losing some soft attack, and it's always nice to have a good balance of soft attack and armor as well. We'll just work with the raw tank at the very start of the game, the Panzer II, and we'll keep everything else the same. We've got a production cost of 10, so it's getting a little bit pricey for a light tank. But now, when we produce these tanks, the armor now is 8.7. It's still super low. It's still super low. Someone's asking about reliability. If it's only a small amount of them in the division, it doesn't matter. So don't get me wrong, it will matter still. You still will lose more if the reliability is really low. But if it's only a very, very small part of the division, it doesn't make a big difference. Man, they have nerfed this to oblivion. Because now, it isn't viable even if you stack armor on it. It's just not viable. So we have 47 armor on this light tank, and it results in 8.7 armor. So it makes me think this potentially could work early game to a degree, just before these technologies start to kick in for piercing. But then again, if you've got some anti-air, there'll be enough piercing there. 25 piercing for the anti-air. There's just not really a way anymore that this strategy can actually work. This has been nerfed to death. It's so sad because this is such a good strategy too. Let's take it to the logical extreme. What if we make it a 10 width division? Because remember, if there's less infantry divisions, it makes up less of the overall division itself. And then we get 9.4 armor. It's still too low. Let's go to the extreme. Let's take it all the way. Let's go for light tank 3. Let's go for armor 3, armor 4. We probably need engine 2 to balance out the armor and the engine for the speed. So light tank chassis. We'll max out the armor. Absolute maximum armor all the way. Then we're going to go for armor skirts, obviously. We don't care about smoke launchers, no radio. Cast armor. We're going to go all the way, guys. Cast armor is not reliable. It's not a good idea, but we're running out of options, right? And then I guess extra ammunition storage. Cheap. Firepower for the sake of firepower. Firepower for the sake of firepower. Armor. Armor. Cheap. Armor. Speed. Speed because it's the minimum speed, and then 20 armor. All right, guys, this is the maximum amount of armor you can put on a light tank. We are now presented with a light tank that has armor of 14. Oh, man, you put so much production into this one tank, and it results in such a small amount of armor. Oh, it's 10.92. Okay, that's actually not that bad. But this is a really technological advanced tank. The problem now we've got is that because this tank is so technologically advanced, so will the infantry piercing technologies, resulting on this division getting pierced anyway. The only time it actually would be worthwhile would be at the very, very start of the game. You'd have to research Light Tank 2. You'd have to slap on as much armor as possible. And you need to get at least above 5 armor on the division. Yeah, so at the very, very start of the game, the piercing is 4.4. When are you going to be facing a division that's just infantry? You're not really, are you? Unless it's a minor power fighting a minor power, like Hungary versus Yugoslavia, or Romania versus Czechoslovakia, something like that. So as you see, if we add on the basic Panzer II at the very start of the game, it gives it 3.2 armor. So this basic infantry can pierce a light tank. The only instance where this could be kind of viable is if the division was damaged and therefore didn't have as much equipment, so therefore its piercing amount was less. We've had a cast armor on, sloped armor, and the armor now is 5.6. Now actually it's viable. It is viable because it's more than 4 armor. So it would kind of work at the start of the game. But man, at the start of the game, that's a really expensive tank. There's no way around this. The only time this will be viable is if you are a minor power fighting a minor power and they don't have anti-air. Now that strategy does not work. I guess I would need to do some major tests to see if the AI is really stupid with its infantry equipment distribution, whether it might lose most of its piercing because it's under-equipped. How much armor do you need on a tank division for the AI not be able to pierce it? That question is a complex question. So let's say hypothetically, you add anti-air onto this tank. For this division to not be able to pierce a tank, it would need to have more than 13.6 armor. So let's just make a traditional division and just see how it looks. So now, for an armor division, it'd be 14.2. Once again, it all comes down to what is the technology of your opponent? What is the army composition of your opponent? Are you going to be fighting tanks? Are you going to be fighting infantry? You've asked her like a really simple question, but the answer is really complex. One of the typical questions that the community asks quite often, how do you make X good? A lot of the time, for instance, with cavalry, all it is you just make it an infantry division, but you replace the infantry with cavalry. That's kind of it. The answer to your question is you just make an infantry division. So let's just say we go for the traditional old-fashioned way of adding a light tank on. Boom. So now we've got 14 armor. So I think the only way this strategy could work now is if you add light tank on as a part of infantry, kind of like the infantry tank meta thing. This is the only way it could actually kind of be viable anymore. But with this method, you have to care about reliability. In this case, you need at least 95 to 100% reliability. That's a super expensive tank too for 1936. And you have to produce twice as many of these to be able to put them on all of your divisions. Ah, that sucks so bad. Well, there's no way around it, guys. This strategy is now dead. There's that one tiny niche window where it would be viable, but the honest truth is there's no way you can make a cost-effective light tank recon anymore. Paradox, you have nerfed that into the ground. F in the chat. One thing I will say though is if you wanted to add extra breakthrough onto your infantry, it seems to be okay for adding extra breakthrough on. And I guess for the other stats as well, it's kind of cute as well. But I suppose there's just easier, more cost-effective ways of adding more soft attack onto divisions such as artillery battalions. On a positive note, you can now stack lots of armor on a division, where before it had an extra chromium cost. So now these late game armor protection technologies are actually viable. So you could go for modern armor protection now, and then you could do this. Check this out. Oh, that was an armor of 94. Wow. And it doesn't have any chromium cost. Because one of the big issues is a lot of major powers don't have a lot of chromium. So a lot of the time, you couldn't really make these tank strategies, I guess, viable, I suppose. Heavy into wars are so expensive. 12 production cost, but they have 95% hardness. In the old days, I tried to engineer a division that's based for overruns. And what I found from experience, the only time overruns work most effectively is when you just play the game normally anyway. You stack air superiority, you have lots of CAS, you have a division that has lots of breakthrough, you have a division that has lots of armor, you have a division that has lots of soft attack. Basically, just play the game the way you would normally would, which is kind of sad, but it is what it is. So if it comes down to it, the only replacement for the light tank meta is kind of going back to some old meta, which was the infantry tank meta. So what is the infantry tank meta? So you're basically making a tank that goes inside of your infantry. Oh, look at that, baby. Look at the length on that one. Oof. And you put that division inside of your infantry as an independent battalion. So it adds loads of armor, loads of breakthrough, nice amount of defense, hard attack, soft attack. In all fairness, it really does make the division girthy. The only downside to it is it's just really expensive, and you have to cost 25 XP to add it on. I guess instead of the 10, I suppose. So I suppose that's decent. But basically, this is like kind of like the, I won't say the French, but definitely the British meta, the British doctrine tanks in World War II at the very beginning of the war. The problem with this is because it's so unbelievably expensive, it's not something you can do in mass numbers. So I guess I'd go for riveted armor to keep the cost down. You can't go for interweaved road wheels, though. Oh, you can't go for a non-track suspension. This is like a light tank only thing. I didn't know that. So in this case, Bogie suspension. You want riveted to make it cheap. I guess you try diesel to begin with. I wouldn't recommend a heavy armament. I'd put on a small armament to make it cheap, like an autocannon. You get a lot of breakthroughs from this, but man, it's expensive. Because you've got so much armor to begin with, you don't even need to add on lots of modules. Actually, do you even need the armor in this case? Probably not. It's got 11 production costs. It keeps it down because the Bogie's free. The riveted makes it cheaper. Gasoline for the extra speed to keep it at 4 kilometers per hour. A little bit of armor just to balance out the reliability and speed. Cheap gun, cheap turret, and wet ammunition storage for 100% reliability. There's no point going over 100% reliability. This is what you would go for. And we just have a look, if we add this on, how it would actually look. So you've got 18 armor. That's viable. Breakthrough is juicy. Loads of juicy soft attack. That makes the division actually like artillery. How much artillery? How much soft attack would you get from artillery? 25. Okay, you get a lot more. Okay, makes sense, I guess. Because you don't want to lose the heavy tanks, you probably have to think about adding a maintenance company on as well. I'd love to do a run with this and see how effective this would be over time. Because, of course, you'd play the same strategy you would play before. As technology progresses, you'd start adding on extra armor. You try your absolute best to keep the speed up, but keep the cost as effective as possible. You want to stack as much breakthrough, and you want to stack as much armor as you can. But once again, you need to keep that reliability nice and high as well. So hence, maintenance companies are probably the way forward. But you don't have to worry too much about armor, though. It's a heavy tank, so it has lots of armor anyway. But that, technically, guys, is the only real kind of replacement you can think of for the light tank recon. But I suppose on the plus side, you could also go for Grand Battle Plan as well. At the moment, Grand Battle Plan is really OP. You're asking, why is Grand Battle Plan OP? Well, you've got Logistics Focus, which reduces supply by 5%. Amazing. You've also got this one too, Theater Training, which gains you terrain traits 20% faster, means you can get adaptable 20% faster, which is one of the most OP traits in the game. I guess Tip of the Spear is kind of decent. It lets you do a naval invasion with plus 10 capacity. The base is 10, and this will increase it to 20. Naval invasion planning plus 20%. I didn't even know it did that. And it also makes Marines and paratroopers free for their division design costs. State serves the military is pretty cool if you can get it early. You want to get this in like the 1930s. If you get in this in 1940, you kind of mitigate the cost. You kind of want this before you've gone for extensive conscription because it's cheaper. And plus you gain the political power, which is also good. Anyway, guys, that's a light tank recon meta. It's super sad that they've nerfed it to the ground, but it just isn't viable anymore, guys. So the only way you could do it is playing with heavy tanks on infantry divisions. And I'll probably do some tests in future. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I love you. Goodbye. You think this video was good? Well, this one is the final form. Click it.